In a few years, Gu Chen started from scratch as an elite investment bank and rose to become the richest man in Yanjing. After a collaboration ended, he was suddenly pointed at by a pair of siblings with dragon and phoenix fetuses outside the Drunken Immortal Residence, calling out for their father. Not only others were stunned, but even Gu Chen himself was also stunned. Following the events, Gu Chen arrived at a residential area and unexpectedly met the mother of the siblings. Surprisingly, Yang Mi is a top traffic actress in the entertainment industry. From then on, Gu Chen realized that he really had two children. From then on, the cold and noble CEO became a bottomless spoiled child and wife maniac. P.S. A cute and precious article by a single female lead and a little sweet pet. Don't criticize it if you don't like it. Wishing you find your favorite novel. Chapter 1. Outside the Drunken Immortal Residence, cute children recognize Dad. You are listening at novel-full.audio. The sky is getting late, and the streets are bustling with cars and horses. It's the evening rush hour. The brightly lit buildings in the city center appear slightly deserted. The luxurious private room on the top floor of Dudu gathers many top-level figures that seem out of reach of ordinary people. The person sitting in the main seat looks the youngest, but it is also the strongest presence in the entire private room. This Drunken Immortal Residence is one of Gu's many industries. And it is also the most luxurious restaurant in the entire Yanjing. Membership system: only those who are personally gifted a membership card by Gu are eligible to enter. As the head of the Gu family, Gu Chen started from scratch a few years ago as an elite investment bank and founded the Gu Group. Within a few years, the company grew bigger and jumped to the top of the Yanjing rich list. Now he himself is the richest man in Yanjing. Gu Chen crossed his legs, leaned against the back of the chair, and glanced at the people around him. Those figures who have been dominating the business world for many years, like stirring wind and rain. Facing a younger generation like Gu Chen sitting in the main seat, he did not show any airs as an elder. Everyone present knew that in just a few years, Gu Chen had risen from an unknown young man to a height that these people had almost struggled for a lifetime to reach. Fingers tapped on the table one after another, and Gu Chen glanced at his assistant Jiang Fan standing beside him. Jiang Fan understood and spoke at the right time. Ladies and gentlemen, today Mr. Gu invited everyone over mainly to talk about the cooperation issues proposed last time. Gu Chen continued with Jiang Fan's words and spoke. Since its establishment, the Gu Group has maintained a consistent attitude towards cooperation, and uncles should also be aware of the industry's reputation. Today I brought the drafted contract over. Uncles, please take a look first. Yunchen, Uncle Tang has always been very optimistic about you. We missed our previous cooperation, and I will take some credit for anything we say this time, Tang Zhanping said with a smile. Gu Chen looked at him with a smile and said, Uncle Tang flattered me. Yunchen has always taken you and all the uncles as role models. Mr. Gu, don't be humble. Among us, which one has your unique vision? The waves behind the Yangtze River push the waves before. We are old. Who said it's not? Mr. Gu started from scratch and has become the richest person in Yanjing in just a few years. Those legendary deeds are still circulating in the circle to this day. Your abilities are evident to all of us. The uncles are among the top figures in Yanjing, and it is Yunchen's honor to be favored by all the elders. Gu Chen was indifferent and distant, but he did not lose his courtesy. Jiang Fan held the pre-printed contract and sent 2 copies to everyone, saying as she sent them. Everyone, let's take a look at the contract first. Last time we went back, we made some adjustments according to everyone's requirements. If there are no problems, we will finalize our cooperation this time. Everyone glanced at each other, and the terms on the contract were very clear, giving them a little bit of a share. He picked up the pen that Jiang Fan had sent along with the contract and signed it. Everyone, have a pleasant cooperation. After chatting with everyone for a while, Gu Chen got up first and walked towards the private door. Jiang Fan put away the contract signed by everyone and followed suit. Others also stood up and followed behind Gu Chen as they got off the elevator. As I walked to the door, I was suddenly caught by two small groups and a waiter squatting on the ground. Gu Chen also looked up. The two little dolls are not very old, but they are pink carved and jade carved, as if they are favored by the creator. Not to mention those two almost identical faces, they are indeed very eye-catching. Whose child is this from? So small, adults are not afraid to lose it. Looking at the magnificent building in front of her, the little girl with two small balls pinched the corner of her own brother's clothes in front of her and said, "Brother, is this here?" Two children, around 4 or 5 years old, are standing in front of the Drunken Immortal Residence and looking inside. The little boy's expression was obviously much more calm, and he turned around to hold his sister's little hand. "It should be right here. Let's go inside and see if Dad is inside." After speaking, he grabbed the little girl and prepared to go in. The waiter at Drunken Immortal Residence saw two adorable little buns, who looked very similar to each other and were clearly twins of dragons and phoenixes, wandering around the door. Thinking they had lost their way, they pushed the door open to ask if they needed any help. "Children, what are you doing here? Why aren't your parents here? Are you lost?" The waiter crouched down while speaking, smiling at the two small balls. The little boy was about to pull his sister in when he heard the sound and looked up. He met the caring gaze of the waitress and gave a sweet smile. "No, sister. My sister and I are here to find our dad. We found our dad's phone number, and I found it here on my own." The little boy pointed to the Drunken Immortal Residence behind her and then stepped forward. "I wanted to open the door and take my sister in, but I didn't have enough height, so I had to turn my head and look at the waiter. Sister, I can't reach it. Could you please help us open the door?" The waiter was attracted by the little boy's obedient smile and polite tone. But when he realized what he was saying, he heard the little boy ask her to help open the door. "Sorry, little friend. We are not allowed to enter here casually. Tonight, only the boss is entertaining our partners, and those partners are of the same age as these two children's grandparents. He must be the one who made the mistake, right? Your father may not be here, otherwise I'll call a car to take you home and ask Mom, okay? Brother, is Dad really not here?" The little girl's mouth flattened, and she was about to drop a small golden bean. The waiter watched as the little boy gently touched the little girl's head. "It's okay, brother, ask again. Goodbye, don't cry." The little boy turned around and looked at the waiter, saying, "Sister, I'm pretty sure that's where I found it. I won't make any mistakes. Could you please take me inside to find my dad? I won't disturb your work, can I?" The waiter watched the two little ones interact so affectionately, and his refusal was stuck in his throat, unable to speak. "But I dare not bring the two people in casually. After all, my boss has a bad temper and getting angry can be terrifying. I brought two children inside myself, and if I offend him, I might not be able to keep the job I finally found. Sister, it took my sister and I a long time to find this place. You can take us inside." The little boy held the waiter's sleeve with his other empty hand, swaying as if playing coquettish with her. The waiter looked at the swaying little arm and his heart was about to soften. I was struggling, thinking whether or not to persuade these two little ones to look elsewhere. But a cold male voice came from beside him, "What's wrong?" As the waiter turned around, his own boss stood behind him with an impatient expression on his face. Looking down at her and the two small group members, with Assistant Jiang and important figures in the business world standing behind them. Startled to a momentary brain crash. "Dad." Before I could figure out how to explain to the boss, I heard two small groups behind me join in. Suspecting that there was something wrong with my ears and also suspecting that my mind was being scared out of control by the boss, the waiter slowly turned his head. But I saw the little boy reach out and point, laughing and calling out to her. "Sister, look. I said I wouldn't make a mistake, my dad is right here. The waiter slowly turned his head back and looked in the direction pointed by the little boy's finger. That was his own boss, right? Chapter 2. You are my dad, you can't mistake me. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Don't talk nonsense. The waiter was so scared that he immediately signaled the boy not to speak, but the little girl was not afraid at all. Sister, this is my dad, I didn't talk nonsense. Upon hearing these words, Gu Chen was momentarily stunned before hearing the people behind him start whispering. What's going on? Mr. Gu has a child now. I didn't hear that Mr. Gu got married. Did these two children admit their mistakes? Isn't Mr. Gu always single? Where did you get such a big child? Jiang Fan looked at Gu Chen, who had just picked up a bunch of contracts from behind and didn't see two small groups, but the sound was truly heard. Listening to the voices of discussion coming from behind, I roughly understood what was going on and cast an inquiring gaze at Gu Chen. I'll go handle it. Gu Chen raised his hand to stop and glanced coldly at the waiter who was still squatting on the ground. Seeing his boss's gaze sweep towards him, his face darkened terrifyingly, and the waiter's neck stiffened, he immediately stood up to explain. Gu. Mr. Gu, I just saw these two children standing at the door and watching for a while. I thought they were lost, so I came out to take a look. Gu Chen remained silent. The waiter burst into tears and said, Yes. I'm sorry, boss. I really don't know what's going on. The two of them said they're looking for Dad, but I didn't know they were looking for you. Maybe they misunderstood. You. Don't argue with the children. Gu Chen's face turned even darker. I'm not. The sudden drop in temperature around him made the waiter tremble with fear. Yes. I'm sorry, boss, I'm sorry. Go back to work. Yes. Yes, we'll go now. The waiter walked away trembling. Seeing Gu Chen getting angry, the crowd behind him dared not discuss casually anymore. Everyone stared at the two children without blinking. Brother, I'm afraid. The little girl hid behind the little boy, timidly revealing her two little prickly heads, and looked over her brother's shoulder at the crowd in front of her. Everyone saw the little boy protect the little girl behind him, patted her head as comfort, and then looked up at the powerful man without any fear. Gu Chen felt strange that the child was so young, but his psychological resilience was much stronger than the group behind him. He didn't care about getting angry, so he crouched down and looked at the two little buns. What are your names, Mom and Dad? Who are they? Why are you here? Jiang Fan watched from the side, her eyes widened. When has Mr. Gu had such a gentle side? When did you say so much in one breath? The little girl hid behind her brother, her round and bright eyes shining on Gu Chen's face, looking both hopeful and scared. When she spoke, her voice softened and she said, Mommy said she won't tell anyone who she is. Listening to these words, Gu Chen felt even more that something was wrong. It wouldn't be their mother intentionally teaching them this way and then calling them out to deceive people. Jiang Fan leaned into Gu Chen's ear and whispered, Mr. Gu, these two children couldn't have been taught to say that, could they? I'm afraid it might have been intentional. Children are most likely to cause sympathy now. After listening, Gu Chen felt that his guess was very likely correct, and he suddenly felt annoyed. With the last bit of patience he had just had, he disappeared, and frost covered his face again. The little girl saw the person she had been longing for sink her face again, which was a bit scary. She flattened her mouth, tears filled her eyes, and plunged her head into the little boy's back, gripping his backpack tightly. Realizing that his younger sister was not in the right mood, the little boy turned around and took her into his arms, gently patting her back. Don't cry, dear. Dad didn't mean to harm you. Brother will explain to Dad, okay? The little girl lifted her face and answered softly, okay. But tears still swirled in her eyes, just looking at Gu Chen like that. The little boy comforted his sister and looked up at Gu Chen's disdainful gaze. He guessed that his father was because his sister didn't say who his mother was. He thought of something bad and thought he and his sister were two little scammers. Our mother has a special identity, and if we speak up in this place, it will affect her work, not because she is a bad person. Just now, Guibao said that because she, like me, wants to protect her mother. Gu Chen's brow relaxed slightly, but he didn't fully believe it. Mom doesn't want us to find Dad, my sister and I sneaked out, Mengbao reluctantly added when she saw that Gu Chen seemed unable. Gu Chen was surprised by Mengbao's calm personality, as well as his completely different speaking style from that of a child. If what he said is true and he can find a long way to come alone with his sister, it indicates that the mother has taught her two children very well, and Gu Chen has developed a little curiosity about this woman. Mengbao breathed a sigh of relief when she saw that Gu Chen didn't resist him and Guibao as much as before, and continued to say. If you mind this title, or if you don't want to admit it because you can't confirm our identities, then Guibao and I can also call you Uncle first. Jiang Fan was completely intimidated by the language and logical ability of this 4 or 5-year-old child, standing in place with confused thoughts. Gu Chen was also surprised that a child in his early years could have such clear logical thinking, and suddenly became even more curious about the mothers of two children. What kind of woman could raise such a well-behaved, clever child? Sending you home. Gu Chen wanted to meet this woman. Since both children said he was their father, he should go see their mother and figure out what happened. Upon hearing these words, Guibao immediately withdrew her tears, broke away from her brother's embrace, and reached out her small hand to pounce on Gu Chen. Uncle hug uncle, send brother and Guibao home, Mengbao. It's over, my sister is going to be separated and I don't want to recognize this father anymore. Gu Chen looked at the obedient treasure thrown into his arms, his body a bit stiff, and he didn't know how to put his hands on it, feeling a soft little ball in front of him, his two small arms wrapped around his neck, and smelling the unique milk fragrance on Guibao's body. Gu Chen felt a bit indescribable and tentatively hugged her. With one hand wrapped around Guibao, Gu Chen stood up holding her and extended his other hand to Mengbao, gesturing for him to lead her up. Mengbao looked at his hand reaching out to him, with broad and warm palms. Unconsciously, he put his hand up and held on to Gu Chen. Everyone watched helplessly as Gu Chen went from a face full of black lines at the beginning, with an absurdly low air pressure, to now a slight smile on his lips, holding one by one, greatly shocked, especially Jiang Fan, standing in place holding the contract documents, as if struck by lightning. Chapter 3 is over. She was unmarried and had 2 children discovered. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. Gu Chen felt the different touch coming from both hands. On the left, holding Mengbao, the little one obediently exuded a hint of stubbornness, like a little adult, trying to conceal his joyful little emotions. On the right side, holding Guibao, the little one is proactive and clingy, with extremely soft flesh on his body, especially the arms around his neck and the small face leaning against his shoulder. The little girl's big eyes were as black as grapes, staring at him without blinking, hiding both anticipation and excitement, but only obediently lying on his shoulder. Jiang Fan, send me off to all uncles and uncles. Jiang Fan, who was named, woke up from a dream and immediately turned around to see off the guests, then sadly returned to the company to handle the follow-up cooperation matters. Gu Chen waited at the entrance of the Drunken Immortal Residence with 2 small buns. The 2 buns didn't argue or make a fuss. One was quietly lying on his shoulder, while the other grabbed his ring in little fingers and stood there, not talking or looking at him. A black Maybach drove out of the basement and stopped in front of 3 people. Secretary Xiao Chen came out of the garage and saw his own boss holding each other, thinking he had hallucinations. He got off the car and was about to open the door for Gu Chen, only to see 3 people standing in front of him. These 2 babies look so similar, they are clearly a pair of twins. But why are you with Mr. Gu? Xiao Chen felt strange and dared not ask his boss much. After getting off the car, he stared at the two children a few more times. Hey, right. These two kids. Xiao Chen suspected that he was dizzy, rubbed his eyes, and then looked back at the serious little boy standing there, with his stiff face and expression. How could you feel like Mr. Gu after seeing a ghost? Xiao Chen shook his head and looked at the girl held in Gu Chen's arms. Uncle, this uncle has been staring at Guaibao all the time. Guaibao is afraid. The girl's soft and sticky voice with a slight nasal sound sounded from Gu Chen's neck. Upon hearing these words, Mengbao looked up and glared at Xiao Chen, who was being caught, and looked around aimlessly, just in front of him. Xiao Chen's body trembled and said, "Oh my goodness. Not to hell. It's really like. This aura and feeling are very similar. What are you looking at? If you don't want your eyes, donate." Gu Chen heard Guaibao's moans and turned his head to look at Xiao Chen impatiently. "It's been so long, you want me to wait here until dawn?" Xiao Chen trembled all over and instantly remained calm, bypassing the front of the car to open the car door for Gu Chen on the side. "Get in the car." Gu Chen put Guaibao on the back seat and turned to Mengbao, "You two sit inside." Asking Mengbao for the addresses of two Tuanzi households, Xiao Chen drove smoothly according to the navigation, occasionally stealing glances at his own boss, who closed his eyes to rest. In the back seat, Gu Chen thought of the two children who were just at the entrance of the restaurant and said that their mother had a special identity. He asked, "There's no one else here now? Let's talk about it. Where are your parents?" "Uncle, our mommy raised me and my brother alone." Guaibao was innocent and cute, swaying on the seat with two short legs and wide-eyed, looking at him. "Where's your dad?" Upon hearing this question, no one answered, and the two children gradually lowered their heads, creating a somewhat sad atmosphere. Gu Chen thought it was probably a scene of a scumbag abandoning his wife and children. When he saw the two children feeling low, he didn't ask any further, only thinking that the man was not a good person. Xiao Chen always keeps an eye on the dynamics in the back seat. When he heard that the two children don't have a father, he thought of something with his own boss, pursed his lips, and secretly cursed a bastard in his heart. If he knew there were such two well-behaved and sensible babies, he wouldn't regret it. A hurried bell rang from Mengbao's backpack. Mengbao touched it and took out a pink and tender phone watch, which should have been put in by Guaibao. Glancing at her younger sister, Mengbao answered the phone. It was Mom. "Baby, where did you and your brother go?" "Mommy has come back. I also brought you gifts." Gu Chen looked at the phone and watch in Mengbao's hand. "The sound seems a bit familiar." "Mom, it's me." Mengbao helplessly helped her forehead. "I'm on our way home with Guaibao. You don't have to worry about us." On the other end of the phone, Dong Misai didn't think there was anything wrong with Mengbao taking Guaibao out to play so late and not coming home, nor did she realize that Mengbao didn't tell her where she had taken her sister. "Okay baby, then mommy is waiting for you to come back and open the gift. Goodbye." She immediately hung up the phone. Gu Chen didn't think much. After hanging up the phone, he leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes to rest. After tinkering all night, Guaibao felt a bit tired and sat in the seat swaying. He was grabbed by Mengbao and leaned against his shoulder, saying, My sister is still mine, and my dad still has to recognize her." The speed was flying fast, and in the blink of an eye, we arrived at the navigation destination. Gu Chen opened his eyes and saw the entrance of a high-end residential area. "Here we go, you two go home, I'm leaving." Gu Chen picked up the two children and was about to turn around to get back into the car, but he didn't expect his hand to be held by someone. "Uncle, it's a bit dark inside. My sister and I are scared when we go back. Can you take us home?" Mengbao grabbed the two fingers he had grabbed for a while before getting on the car, feeling a bit reluctant to let go for a moment. However, he also had another selfish intention. Gu Chen raised his eyebrows and said, Mengbao breathed a sigh of relief in her heart, but it didn't show on her face. She held on to Gu Chen and her sister, walking towards the community. Arriving at a detached villa, the two children stopped and said, "Uncle, thank you for taking us home. My mother is at home, why don't you go in and have a drink of water before leaving?" Menbao's little abacus was racing in his heart. He thought he wanted Gu Chen and his mother to meet. If Gu Chen was really his and Gui Bao's father, then his mother would definitely recognize him. Little did they know, how could Gu Chen, who had been in the business world for several years, not see the small details in a child's heart. However, Gu Chen did indeed want to meet this mother. He became a bit curious about her, so he pushed the boat and opened the door of the villa with the key of Mengbao. Yang Mi, who was drinking water in the living room and waiting for her two treasures to return, heard a sound coming from the entrance foyer and quickly got up, carrying a water glass, and ran over. "Baby, do you think?" Seeing Gu Chen enter with the key, Yang Mi didn't react for a moment. Her voice gradually weakened, and she swallowed the words "mommy" back with her saliva. Hearing a sound behind Gu Chen, two small clumps popped their heads from both sides of his legs and sweetly shouted, "Mommy." Pop, snap. The custom-made glass water glass she was holding slipped from her hand and shattered all over the ground. Yang Mi froze completely in place and forgot to answer for a moment. Her mind was full of thoughts. It's over, a child has been discovered, it's still too. Chapter 4. Overnight. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The air fell silent for a moment. Gu Chen looked at the slightly panicked person in front of him, his eyes flickering inexplicably, and he quickly spoke out to explain. "I ran into your two children in a place and it was getting late. I was afraid they might have an accident, so I took the initiative to send them back, hoping it wasn't sudden." His voice was a bit cold, his tone was polite and distant, but on the contrary, it made Yang Mi, whose heart was hanging high, unable to understand. "So. Is it that simple? Mommy." Xiamengbao was so happy that she wanted to rush towards Yang Mi, but she was immediately stopped by Yang Mi. "Baby. Don't move." At the next moment, a pair of strong hands lifted the child directly and placed it in their arms. It's Gu Chen. He obviously also noticed the mess that had shattered the ground. At this moment, Yang Mi finally realized that she had lost consciousness. Seeing the broken glass, she quickly squatted down to tidy up the fragments. "Thank you, I'll pack up quickly. The child is playful and has taken up your time. Thank you for bringing them back." Mengbao watched his mother squatting there picking up fragments, afraid that she might hurt her hand, but he also knew if it would pass. "Maybe it will also make mommy worry, and I can't help but feel anxious in my heart." The little hands holding on to Gu Chen's trousers unconsciously tightened. Gu Chen felt it, and his heart couldn't help but soften when he saw the small face wrinkled and worried. "Mengbao, be good and keep an eye on your sister. Uncle will help your mommy. We will definitely not let mommy get hurt." After speaking, his big hands rubbed and comforted Menbao's head. Then put down the obedient treasure and walked up directly to help. God knows, if Assistant Xiao Chen sees his boss condescending and squatting here to pick up glass shards, he will really go blind. Gu Chen didn't think much at first, but the woman in front of him stood up as if startled by his squatting motion. No need, I'll do it myself." Gu Chen raised his eyebrows, although his heart was strange, he couldn't stop his movements as he looked at the two children nearby who were eager to see. "I just don't want the two children to worry." Speaking, he even took the opportunity to command the woman in front of him. "There must be some broken glass that can't be picked up. Can you bring a broom and a dustpan? The person in front of me, dressed in a simple suit, is worth a lot just by looking at the fabric." With every move and gesture, his noble demeanor was fully displayed, even carrying a hint of the aura of a superior. Especially that face, with delicate facial features, cold eyebrows and eyes, and an appearance that can barely beat a little fresh meat in countless circles. Yang Mi didn't know what she was thinking, but she actually got up to get a broom and a dustpan. Then I watched as Gu Chen tidied up the hygiene, without even looking at myself a few more times throughout the process. Young me was puzzled in her heart, and even began to have some doubts about herself. Why is this person so calm? No matter what she says, she can also be considered a top-tier actress with beauty and figure. If it were someone else who suddenly saw a celebrity, would they have to jump up happily? I took a few more glances. After confirming that the man in front of her did not pay too much attention to herself, Young Mi also felt relieved. Forget it, compared to this, I'm glad that I didn't get exposed for having 2 children when I was unmarried. It's a bit late, so I won't disturb you anymore. Gu Chen did not ignore the nervous and cramped appearance of the woman in front of him throughout the journey, and took the initiative to leave. Young Mi is naturally willing. But the 2 cute kids are not willing anymore. Upon hearing that Gu Chen was about to leave, Meng Bao quickly looked at Guibao, but with just one glance, the 2 siblings immediately understood the meaning behind it. Meng Bao. Goodbye, did you hear that? Dad is leaving. Guibao. I heard you, but I can't bear to part with my dad. Meng Bao. Today we finally saw Dad, but next time we don't know where to find him. No, we can't let him go easily. Guibao blinked his beautiful big eyes and said, then I cry. Then, the 2 little ones quickly exchanged glances behind Gu Chen. Meng Bao immediately stepped forward and pinched his sister's waist. At that moment, Guibao immediately entered the play, and the water spirit's big eyes turned red, immediately filled with tears. Then, Guibao tightly hugged Gu Chen's leg and didn't let go, while looking at him with pitiful big eyes. Uncle, don't leave. Young Mi was suddenly shocked and confused. She has always been strict in educating her children and must be vigilant when encountering strangers. But now, what is the situation with her good friend? Looking at Meng Bao again, I found that he was also on the side, although he didn't hug Gu Chen's entire leg like Meng Bao did. But he also reached out a small hand and pulled at the hem of Gu Chen's pants, as if afraid of him leaving. Gu Chen was also stunned, completely unaware of such a scene. His puzzled gaze couldn't help but look at the woman in front of him, who even had a plain face and was completely devoid of dust. A hint of embarrassment spread in the air in front of the 2. Guibao. Uncle, Guibao can't bear to part with you. Guibao's tears fell to the ground like she didn't want any money, and Yang Mi's heart was shattered when she saw it. Normally, Guibao rarely cries, but tonight never mind, for the sake of my daughter, I don't want this face. Why don't you stay tonight? My youngest daughter seems to be reluctant for you to leave. Yang Mi touched her nose, feeling very uncertain and asked tentatively. Although she also knew her identity, it was irresponsible to just let a stranger stay overnight at home. But Yang Mi still couldn't control her softness and wanted Gu Chen to stay and help soothe her. Gu Chen didn't expect this to happen. Watching the little girl's chubby little face cry until it turns pale and red, Gu Chen's heart inexplicably softened. Previously, he just thought this little girl was unexpectedly cute and adorable, but now he can't help but feel heartbroken. Bending down to pick up Guibao, Gu Chen felt a bit at a loss again. All he could think about was how to coax him. He can act swiftly in the mall, even breaking down the enemy's defenses without the need for a single soldier. But when facing a few-year-old baby, he is really inexperienced. Don't talk about coaxing children. He has never been in a relationship before. The only accident, also many years ago. While pondering anxiously, I heard the mother of the child standing next to me saying something somewhat conflicted. Stay here. Gu Chen hesitated. Rationality told him that this was clearly not appropriate. His identity is special, and if someone catches him, it's uncertain how much trouble it will cause. Perhaps this innocent family will still be implicated in the future. He looked at his obedient treasure with tears in his arms, his eyes wide open and full of hope, and then looked at the cute treasure standing next to him silently, but his little hand tightly held on to his trousers. Gu Chen nodded awkwardly and agreed. Well, good. Wait a moment, I'll contact my assistant. As he spoke, he handed the obedient treasure to Yang Mi and then went to the balcony to make a phone call. And Yang Mi looked at Guaibao, who stopped crying after hearing these words, and her eyes suddenly became resentful. Little ancestor. The two little ones who succeeded in their plan looked at each other happily, and the surprise instantly bloomed in their eyes. Meng Bao quietly gave a thumbs up to Guaibao, who was lying on Gu Chen's shoulder, in a place they couldn't see. The sky is getting late, and pedestrians are rushing on the road in 2s and 3s. Even if this is a high-end residential area, it's a bit eye-catching for a low-key and luxurious Maybach to just park there. Xiao Chen was sitting in the car, his thoughts racing for a moment. My boss has been in for so long, why hasn't he come out yet? Otherwise, get off and take a turn, the air inside the car will be stuffy. Just as he was bored, the sound of his phone vibrating suddenly rang out. You are the most beautiful cloud in my sky. Xiao Chen suddenly jumped up from his seat, his head hitting the edge of the window, causing his face to contort in pain. Taking out my phone, I saw that it was my boss's voice call. In an instant, my head no longer hurts and the air is not stuffy. I immediately pressed the answer button and leaned my ear towards the earpiece, saying, "Hey, boss." Gu Chen dialed the phone and listened to Xiao Chen's slightly cheerful ringing, with black lines all over his head. Yang Mi's face turned almost purple as she suppressed her smile beside her. This person looks quite serious, even a bit aloof. However, this assistant's taste is clearly at odds with his superiors, and it may seem too unconventional. Meng Bao. Guaibao. Seeing the reaction of the mother and son, Gu Chen's face turned completely black. The phone was connected, and Gu Yunchen said, "You go prepare a set of clothes to change and send it over, and then you can leave directly." Upon hearing these words, Xiao Chen suddenly became cold and didn't react for a long time. Prepare clothes. Is this not going back? No, what's the situation? Sleeping here. Those two children won't really until Gu Chen spoke again. Do you need me to explain it again? Xiao Chen woke up from a dream and quickly nodded and bowed over the phone, saying, "Okay, Mr. Gu, I'll go handle it right away. Also, will I come to pick you up tomorrow morning?" "Well, come and pick me up from the company tomorrow morning, and also, your bonus for this month is gone." After saying this, Gu Chen didn't give Xiao Chen time to react and hung up directly. Inside the car, Xiao Chen was digesting the information on the phone and couldn't recall it for a long time. Did you discover any incredible secret? His boss is hidden marriage. And you still have these two big kids. If this were to be exposed, would the circles of the upper-class society in Yanjing still have to explode? Gu Chen, the CEO of Yanjing who made it to the list of the wealthiest people in a few years, is secretly married and has children. Staying up at night thinking about it is exciting. Wait, what did the boss just say mean? Is the bonus gone? Why? On this ordinary night, an assistant was driving back to the office in a messy wind. Chapter 5. Confidentiality Agreement. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The two children usually don't have a father to accompany them. Today, they finally left Gu Chen behind and kept pestering him until midnight without wanting to sleep. After finally calming down the exceptionally excited Guaibao and covering Meng Bao with a blanket, Gu Chen was finally able to rest for a while. I couldn't help but feel this way about taking care of children, and I don't know if my future children will also feel the same way. Meng Bao lay under the bed, feeling a bit unsatisfied. He opened his eyes and whispered to Gu Chen, "Uncle, can I still see you tomorrow when I wake up?" "Of course, baby. Since Mom promised you to let Uncle stay at home tonight, as long as you and your sister can wake up on time tomorrow, we will definitely see Uncle again. Put your heart in your stomach and sleep well." Yang Mi walked in from the door, calmed the slightly uneasy Meng Bao, and handed Gu Chen a cup of warm water. Tired, take a sip of water slowly. I'm really bothering you today. It's okay, I'm quite happy. This is my first time playing with children, Gu Chen said politely as he took the water. The air was a bit quiet for a moment, and Yang Mi looked at the man in front of her with a cold and gentle profile, and was stunned. Gu Chen took a sip of water and saw that Yang Mi had not replied. He turned around and tightened the blanket for Meng Bao, warning him. Sleep well, uncle will accompany you to breakfast tomorrow. Good night. Good night, uncle. Meng Bao finally calmed down and closed his eyes. So, it can be considered that I have my dad with me, right? Meng Bao thought, with a smile on his lips, and gradually fell asleep. In the dream, my father recognized him and my sister, played with them, took them shopping, and the family of 4 lived happily together listening to the two saying good night to each other. Yang Mi finally regained her senses and felt a bit embarrassed. Unexpectedly, I have been staring at them for so long without realizing it, and I don't know if I have been discovered, but she felt a bit strange again. According to this man, the babies and he were just a chance encounter. How could they stick to him so much? Guibao himself is innocent, and it's not surprising that he's likable, but why is that stinky kid so reluctant to part with him? After thinking for a while, Yang Mi couldn't figure it out. Feeling it was a waste of her brain, she leaned forward and kissed Qin Mengbao's forehead, gesturing for the man to follow her out. Seeing that he doesn't look like a bad person, he's too lazy to think anymore. As long as the 2 babies are happy, let them go. Gu Chen actually wanted to ask Yang Mi where she lived, but both children were asleep and didn't feel embarrassed to speak up. Receiving Yang Mi's gaze signal, I followed her out of the room and saw her pointing to a bedroom next to the children's room. Without the playfulness of the 2 children, the living room seemed a bit deserted, with only the small night lights on the walls shining faintly. I just tidied up the guest room, maybe the environment isn't that good, you understand. Yang Mi deliberately lowered her voice, which unexpectedly sounded good in Gu Chen's ear. I'll stay in this room here. If you need anything, just come over and call me. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry to trouble you all tonight. Gu Chen didn't hesitate either, thanked him, and then turned to walk towards the bedroom. In the bedroom, only a dim yellow night light was on, and Gu Chen scanned the room with the bright light. The room was a bit small, but the advantage was cleanliness. Gu Chen's impression of this mother has improved significantly from the initial suspicion of his 2 children stuttering and refusing to speak up, to now when he has observed it all the way. Assistant Xiao Chen had already brought over a change of laundry and was first taken into the bedroom by Yang Mi, who placed it on the small cabinet next to the bed. Gu Chen took a shower, took out the clothes from the bag, and changed them into clothes. He relaxed and lay on the bed. Definitely not as comfortable as the bed in his own villa, but after all, he was at someone else's house and didn't pay much attention, so Gu Chen made do with sleeping for the night. After socializing for so long and spending half a night playing with his 2 children, he really feels a bit tired. Unexpectedly, lying in bed, he didn't think about the company in his mind. Instead, there were smiles on his 2 children's faces, and he slept quite well that night. The next day at 6 o'clock, the sunlight had already jumped out of the horizon, and Gu Chen's biological clock woke him up on time. Using the toothbrush and toothpaste in the guest bathroom, Gu Chen brushed his teeth and washed his face. After dressing up and organizing himself, he opened the door and arrived at the quiet living room. The mother and son had not yet woken up. I was about to send a message to ask Xiao Chen to bring some breakfast over. Before going to bed, he promised Xiao Tuanzi to accompany them to dinner this morning. Besides, he was busy discussing cooperation last night, and he didn't eat much. He's really a bit hungry now. The floor-to-ceiling curtains block the light very well. Even though the sky is bright now, there is still no light in the living room. Gu Chen walked over and the artificial intelligence scanned someone approaching, automatically opening the curtains. The morning sunshine suddenly fell on him, not glaring, warm, and with a comfortable feeling that made people feel ironed, spreading throughout his body with blood. Just before the edited information was sent out, the anti-theft door was knocked on with a loud bang. Seeing the people outside knocking for a long time, the three people in the bedroom had not yet reacted, so Gu Chen had to get up and open the door. Who came to find these three women in the early morning? Outside the door, Yang Mi's agent Su Li knew that Yang Mi couldn't wake up at this time and was about to continue knocking on the door. At the next moment, there was a rustling sound at the door, and then, the door opened, leaving her dumbfounded. Watching the unfamiliar man opening the door in front of her, Su Li couldn't even think about what kind of divine this handsome man was, and her expression instantly cracked. I'm sorry, I went the wrong way. Thinking she knocked on the wrong door, Su Li apologized and retreated. I scanned and tested the environment inside the corridor, looked up at the door sign, and then stretched my neck to look at the decoration inside the door. Then he froze. I didn't go wrong, so this man. My ancestors. Confirming that she didn't knock on the wrong door, coupled with Gu Chen's face, which instantly killed a group of fresh meat in the circle, Su Li subconsciously mistook him for Yang Mi's secret boyfriend. Instantly out of breath, he pushed Gu Chen away and then strode towards Yang Mi's bedroom, frantically smashing the door. Ancestor, you are really my ancestor. Hurry up and come out of here. Are you still in the mood to sleep? Ah. Yang Mi opened the door drowsily and looked at Su Li, who was already furious at the bedroom door, unsure of what had happened. Sister Li, what's wrong? Why is it so grand in the morning? Su Li shook Yang Mi's shoulders back and forth with both hands, wishing to shake her brain and see what was inside. What's wrong with me? Are you still asking me what's wrong? Ancestor. How dare you hide men behind my back at home? Young Miran was not yet clear-headed when Su Li shook her, feeling even more confused. What kind of man? It wasn't until she saw Gu Chen walking behind Su Li with the anti-theft door closed that Yang Mi suddenly woke up and slammed the door. It's over. It's broken. How could you forget him? Paying for my own heartache last night, quickly changing clothes and entering the living room, I saw Su Li and Gu Chen sitting on the sofa. The atmosphere was tense for a moment, but it seemed like it was only one-sided. Su Li stared at Gu Chen with a sharp gaze, as if she was about to shoot him in the opposite direction. On the other hand, Gu Chen, with legs crossed, leaned against the sofa pillow, flipping through the fashion magazine that Yang Mi had just photographed on the coffee table. This man has a strong aura and a good ability to withstand pressure. How could he not change his face when being stared at by Sister Li so much? Yang Mi complained in her heart, but dared not show it on her face. She strolled up to Su Li and sat down, smiling all over her face. Sister Li, things are not as you think, I can explain them. Explain. How do you explain? My ancestors. Your career is currently on the rise. I didn't say much with 2 children by my side, but you brought me a man home now. Su Li was extremely angry and scolded Yang Mi. Yang Mi touched her nose, but she didn't want to. Sister Li, it's not as you think. Yesterday, Meng Bao and Guai Bao sneaked out to play, and it was he who accidentally met and brought them home. He originally wanted to leave last night, but I don't know what happened to Guai Bao. He cried and made a fuss, just asking him to accompany him. I can't help but calm down, calm down. Upon hearing these words, Su Li's anger somewhat subsided, but she still didn't give Gu Chen a good face. Fortunately, I didn't really carry her on my back and bring people home. However, Su Li still had a cold face and said, do you know how many paparazzi you have outside? If you get caught, I'll see how you explain it clearly. Yang Mi can only apologize, there's nothing she can do. Who would want her to spoil those 2 little ancestors at home? Meng Bao and Guai Bao were already awakened when Su Li walked in. At this moment, they secretly opened a small crack in the children's room door and eavesdropped on a few people outside. Guai Bao held the sleeping doll in her hand and followed Meng Bao, who had not yet woken up. Brother, Why did Aunt Lily come? It seems like we're talking about Mom's work. Let's not go out and eavesdrop here. Aunt Lily doesn't seem to like her dad. She won't drive him away, will she? The more obedient Bao listened, the more wrong he became. He was so anxious that he pulled his brother's hand. Meng Bao also heard something was wrong, but he understood that he couldn't rush out with his sister, otherwise it might affect his mother's work. Okay, since she's speaking for you, let's sign a confidentiality agreement. I have to consider the reputation of my own artist, and of course, it's for your own good. Su Li looked at Yang Mi with a smile on her face and gave up struggling, but after all, it was a matter of privacy for the popular actress, and she still had to figure out a way out for her. Shit. Gu Chen laughed, thinking of him as the grand CEO. He didn't care about his reputation and stayed here overnight. What kind of agreement would he have to sign to protect others in the end? It's ridiculous. No signature. Gu Chen looked disdainful and glanced at Su Li, then turned his gaze again to the fashion magazine in his hand. Well, I have to say, it looks pretty good and didn't waste her beauty. Su Li was annoyed by Gu Chen's arrogant and indifferent attitude, and the newly extinguished fire immediately reignited. You. Sisterly, stay calm. As soon as Su Li uttered a word, she was interrupted by Yang Mi and gave her a glare, holding her arm and not looking at Gu Chen. Yang Mi was caught in a dilemma between the two and could only act as a mediator, fighting Ha. Sisterly, he's not a bad person. He won't tell me about having 2 children. I believe him. People's hearts are separated by their bellies, my ancestors. How did you know what he would say outside today when he stepped out of this door? Can you trust an outsider so easily? Su Li is going to be infuriated by Yang Mi. No, just because he was able to bring back Meng Bao and Guai Bao yesterday, others can trust him. Don't worry, Sister Li. Su Li doesn't want to talk to her. Chapter 6. Encounters 5 years ago. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Gu Chen, who had been paying attention to the magazine, was somewhat surprised when he heard this. He averted his gaze from the magazine and sneered at Yang Mi. It's really rare for someone as simple as her to become so popular in the entertainment industry. 2 lines of sight fell on his face, and Gu Chen could just put away his smile. Yang Mi. Do you seem to have some objections to me? She seemed to understand the mockery in his smile. What are you laughing at? It's nothing, I think you're such a naive person, and it doesn't seem like you're suitable for a place like the entertainment industry. At first glance, Yang Mi thought he was praising her, but this tone was not right. No matter how he listened, Yang Mi was taken aback for a moment, and then realized that he was saying she was stupid, but she was speaking for him. Hey! Isn't it because Guaibao Mengbao couldn't bear to part with you and insisted on holding you here for the night? Otherwise, I would have let you leave last night, okay? You're such a good person. How could you treat yourself like a donkey liver and lungs? Yang Mi was stuck in her throat, unable to get down and couldn't get up in one breath, infuriated by Gu Chen's teasing tone. The more the 2 children listen, the more they feel off. Brother, Mommy seems to have an argument with Dad. Unable to resist any longer, Guaibao rushed out of the room, holding the doll in one hand and his brother in the other. Mengbao stumbled when his sister pulled him, and it was too late to stop him, so he was forced to run behind Guaibao. When did Guaibao become so strong? Mengbao ran while thinking. Auntie Lily, don't blame Mommy and Uncle Gu. The doll was thrown aside, and my brother's hand stopped holding it. Guaibao bumped into Su Li's arms and held onto her waist without letting go. Turning to look up at Yang Mi, her big eyes flickering with tears, Mommy, I'm sorry, it's all my fault, Baofei. I insist on taking Uncle Gu home and causing trouble for Mommy. Guaibao has put you in a difficult position, right? I'm sorry. Su Li looked at the crying little cute child in her arms, with tears all over her face. She only felt heartbroken in her heart, how could she still bear to harm her? I had to hold on to Guibao's small buttocks and pick him up, place him on my lap, and give him some comfort. "Oh good baby, don't cry anymore auntie, won't she be angry anymore?" On the other side, Mengbao was abandoned by her younger sister halfway, standing on the side with her small hands tightly gripping the panties of her pajamas, biting her lips and refusing to speak. She only looked at Yang Mi and Gu Chen with a fixed expression, a little aggrieved, but stubbornly did not let tears fall from her eyes. Mengbao. God knows how much it hurts to watch my sister cry. After being provoked by the two children, Su Li didn't have the mood to think about any agreement or disagreement. Since Mengbao and Yang Mi trusted him, she wouldn't say anything, but this man. She just can't stand it. The matter came to an end like this. After a morning of chaos, Gu Chen should also go to the company, and Xiao Chen has already waited downstairs. I originally wanted Xiao Chen to bring breakfast over and have it with the two children, but after being stirred up, the message was not sent out. Gu Chen had to break his promise, but fortunately, Mengbao didn't remember this matter. He thought he might have the opportunity to make up for it again in the future. "It's getting late, I'll say goodbye first." Gu Chen raised his wrist and glanced at his watch. With his long legs down, he stood up from the sofa, greeted a few people, and walked towards the door. "Su Li. You know it's getting late now, why did you go early? Why didn't you know it was getting late last night?" Yang Mi saw Gu Chen get up and wanted to stand up to see him off. Just as her buttocks were lifted halfway, Su Li pressed her thighs and pushed them back into the sofa. Faced with Su Li's cannibalistic gaze, Yang Mi still couldn't muster the courage to say that she only wanted to see him off out of politeness. Fortunately, Gu Chen didn't care so much, and she breathed a slight sigh of relief in her heart. Although the two adorable children were reluctant to let go of Gu Chen, they also knew that he had his own business to do and could not keep Gu Chen at his home all the time. Guibao sat in Su Li's arms, eagerly looking at his brother. "Guibao. Brother, come up with a solution. Otherwise, the next time I see my dad, I won't know when." Mengbao was also a bit anxious. When she received a signal from her sister's gaze, she suddenly had an idea and rushed to the door, grabbing Gu Chen. "Uncle, can you leave a phone number for me and my sister?" Mengbao sat on the ground, looking pitifully at Gu Chen. Gu Chen was changing his shoes at the door, feeling his pants tighten. He lowered his head and saw Mengbao sitting on the ground. This was the first time the little one had shown this expression. Oh no, the second time, the last time was last night when he begged him to take him and his sister home. "Why?" Gu Chen asked, "What do you need your own phone number for?" Because of that, my sister and I will feel like we still have a father. And we won't be children without a father anymore." Mengbao bit his lip, mustered up courage, and finally spoke out his thoughts, even though his voice grew louder and quieter until it was almost inaudible in the end. Even if Dad doesn't recognize himself and his sister now, he wants to take a gamble on his softness. The small figure sitting on the ground lowered its head slightly, its body tinged with a hint of desolation, and its voice unconsciously carried a crying tone. It pricked Gu Chen's heart tightly, and there was a densely packed area with pain. It's really the first time I've seen Mengbao, who feels aggrieved, with a crying tone. Yang Mi has been secretly observing Gu Chen's reaction. When she heard Mengbao's words, her heart suddenly tightened. She seemed to understand why the two treasures were so reluctant to let go of this man last night. Is it still because I neglected their feelings? But back then Gu Chen actually really wants to ask Yang Mi, who is sitting on the sofa, why has she been raising her two children for so many years and hasn't she thought about looking for their father? But after thinking for a long time, he felt that this was someone else's family business, and as an outsider, it was not easy for him to interfere. Okay, go get your notes. Uncle is waiting for you. Gu Chen still didn't ask and only agreed to the boy's request for his phone number. Uncle, just say it directly. I can remember it. After reporting his phone number, Gu Chen asked Meng Bao to repeat it again. Seeing that he really remembered it, he said goodbye to him. Remembering Meng Bao and his sister finding the entrance of the Drunken Immortal Residence alone yesterday, Gu Chen felt that this child had the courage and brain to succeed in the future. I don't know if his biological father would regret choosing to abandon them if he knew he had two such intelligent children. On this side, Yang Mi was absent-mindedly teasing the obedient treasure held in Su Li's arms, but in reality, her attention was all on obedient treasure, thinking that she had not considered whether the two children lacked fatherly love from childhood to adulthood, and was lost in thought. Suddenly hearing Gu Chen and Meng Bao report a string of numbers that had been engraved in their minds for the past 5 years, their faces turned pale and devoid of blood. Guibao watched as his mother's face became abnormal and he was a bit worried. He whispered tentatively, "What's wrong with you, Mom?" At this moment, Yang Mi felt as if she couldn't hear anything, immersed in her own world. If I hadn't misheard that phone call myself, that's right, it's impossible to hear wrong. It's him. In a moment of blank mind, all the memories of 5 years ago flooded into her mind. With a swoop, Yang Mi suddenly stood up and rushed to the door, stopping Gu Chen who had already opened the door and was preparing to leave. Su Li only had time to see Yang Mi's instantly red eyes clearly. Wait. Wait. Did you? 5 years ago, have you ever stayed at the Magic City Hotel, Presidential Suite? Chapter 7. We go to the hospital. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 5 years ago. Upon hearing this familiar timeline, Gu Chen couldn't help but be taken aback and a hint of doubt arose in his heart. How would she know that I stayed at that hotel 5 years ago? Watching Meng Bao standing up from the ground patting her buttocks and Xiao Bao in Su Li's arms on the sofa, who was only about 4 or 5 years old, a thought slipped through Gu Chen's mind. His spine stiffened, and Gu Chen gradually tightened his 5 fingers as he grabbed the door handle, exerting force until his knuckles turned white. The scene from that night 5 years ago flooded his mind like a floodgate. Is that her? I can't remember clearly at that time, his consciousness was not very clear, he only remembered the woman in his arms with a small face as big as a palm, her skin as pure as snow, and her touch as smooth as silk. As for her face, for the past 5 years, Gu Chen often dreamed of the scene at that time, but the person's face in the dream always seemed to be covered with a mysterious veil, making it difficult to see through her facial features. Gu Chen frowned tightly and quickly withdrew from his memories. Closing the door, Gu Chen turned around. The little woman in front of him grabbed his arm with a hand that trembled with force, her eyes turning red. The whole person was filled with extreme panic and unease, with a sudden appearance imprinted in his eyes and piercing his heart. Thinking of the two treasures calling him "Dad" at the entrance of Drunken Immortal Residence, Gu Chen felt that his idea was probably right. Yang Mi looked at him eagerly, feeling an indescribable bitterness in her heart. That person left a note with that string of numbers on it, and took advantage of her lack of clarity to leave. But neither she nor he expected that on such a crazy night, she became pregnant. Over the past 5 years, she had tried countless times to dial that number and ask if he would still be responsible, but she gave up at the last minute. Forget it, the two babies are so considerate. If we find each other as a scoundrel, she cannot afford the consequences. We're going to the hospital now. Gu Chen knew that he couldn't panic now and had to go to the hospital for a check-up. He would wait until the results came out. Yang Mi has always been in a tense state, even though Gu Chen comforted her, she still hasn't eased a bit. She was too nervous, so nervous that her limbs were cold, even if she just stood there, she was shaking. Brother, please help mommy sit over. Guibao looked at Yang Mi in extremely poor condition, feeling extremely distressed, afraid that she might fall and touch her. Before Meng Bao could make any movement, Gu Chen's powerful hand had already grasped Yang Mi's right hand, which was holding his arm. Upon seeing this, Meng Bao immediately ran to the other side and took her left hand. The two of them, one on the left and one on the right, took Yang Mi, who was already stiff and couldn't walk, step by step and sat down on the sofa. Guibao jumped out of Su Li's arms and rushed directly to Yang, hugging her leg. Tears rolled in his eyes, but he struggled not to let it fall. "Mommy, what's wrong with you? Don't scare the baby." Mengbao walked over and gently pulled away his younger sister. "Be good, Mommy needs time, let's wait here for a while," he said while touching her head to soothe her emotions. Seeing Yang sitting on the sofa without speaking, Gu Chen walked to the balcony and took out his phone to call his assistant Xiao Chen. "If you don't go to the company later, go directly to the hospital and have them prepare. It's important to keep it confidential." "Okay boss, are you feeling unwell?" "No, it's for parent.child testing." After the impact of his boss staying up late last night, Xiao Chen believes he can handle any unexpected events. "But I didn't expect this phone call to chop him apart again." "Understood." At one point, Xiao Chen suspected that he had misunderstood, but due to professional ethics and the threat of bonuses, he immediately took the conversation. "Bring up a pair of sunglasses and a hat, women's, that can cover your face." After Gu Chen finished explaining, he hung up the phone and walked back to the living room. After the morning's ups and downs, Gao Ding's suit had already wrinkled, but he didn't care at all and sat directly next to Yang. Looking at her tense hands, he didn't know where to put them. He felt a little sad for no reason, but he didn't know how to comfort her. He could accompany her silently. Su Li finished watching the whole process and understood the general process. She sighed as she watched Yang sit there feeling lost and cramped. "If someone takes a photo of you now, rumors about entertainment headlines will fly again. Alright, relax a bit. You are also a post-production level character, so don't show any flaws when you go out later." Time passed by minute by second, and the living room was quiet with needles falling in the air. Only the electronic clock on the wall ticked as usual, while the few people sitting on the sofa each had their own thoughts. "Yang. What should we do? If it were really him, would he take away the 2 children in the future? I don't think so, he doesn't look like that person, but after all, that's his flesh and blood." Su Li. "It's over. In the future, not only should we hide the children, but we really need to hide the men Mengbao and Guibao. We're going to have a dad. But Mommy seems unhappy. What should we do? Can it be that Mommy is unwilling to accept Daddy?" As for Gu Chen, he was deeply immersed in self-doubt. For example, why has she never looked for herself in the past 5 years? But instead of choosing to grow up alone with 5 children. Xiao Chen knocked on the door with sunglasses and hat, finally breaking the eerie atmosphere between the two of them. Gu Chen got up and went to open the door, reached out to take it and asked Xiao Chen to wait in the car. I casually took off a long coat from the hanger standing at the door. Gu Chen reached out and pulled Yang up, putting her on clothes, wearing sunglasses and a hat, and then asked Mengbao to find a mask to put on for her. "Can you walk by yourself after going to the hospital?" Gu Chen looked at Yang, who still couldn't calm her emotions, and was somewhat uncertain about her situation. "It's okay, I'll take her with me from behind." "You take the 2 children with you first." Su Li actually doesn't really want to take Gu Chen's car, but she has no choice. She took a taxi this morning and didn't drive her own car. Gu Chen nodded and handed Yang over to Su Li. With Su Li following, he was indeed relieved. Maybach's parking in this community may be a bit eye-catching, but fortunately it's now working hours and not much attention has been paid. When Su Li and Yang saw this low-key but luxurious black business car, they both saw surprise in each other's eyes. At least it's a luxury car worth several million yuan, equipped with dedicated assistants for pick-up and drop-off. This man is not only talented in appearance, but also has a somewhat mysterious identity. At least, the initial concern about Yang was somewhat reduced. 4 people dressed up rigorously and got on the car. Gu Chen and Yang sat in the back row with their 2 children, while Su Li sat in the passenger seat. The car drove for a distance, and Su Li suddenly thought of a very serious question. There are few people in the community who haven't been noticed, but there are many people in the hospital. What if she appears in the hospital like this and is photographed? Su Li turned around and looked at Yang Mi, but her words were directed towards Gu Chen. Otherwise, the two of them would just go home and wait for the result. I don't know. It's just a matter of explaining more. Su Li didn't really believe it, but looking at Yang Mi's eager expression, she didn't feel embarrassed to express her thoughts and silently took out her phone. Let the team make a statement first, and be prepared in case it is really discovered. Chapter 8. Caught in the hospital by journalists. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. An inconspicuous small entrance to Jiahe Hospital. The dean waited anxiously at the door with experts from various disciplines. Because just now, the executive assistant called and asked them to prepare, only saying that the boss wanted to bring someone over, without specifying what they wanted to do. He was so anxious that his beard was about to turn white, so he had to call all the department heads over and be prepared. Finally, the black Maybach appeared in sight. The dean quickly welcomed him with people, fearing that he might be neglected in some way. Mr. Gu, where are you feeling unwell? The car stopped, and as soon as Gu Chen got out of the car, he heard the dean ask him this. He frowned and glanced at Xiao Chen who was opening the door for Yang Mi. He didn't mention such important information in advance. And over there, Assistant Xiao Chen's hand as he closed the car door paused, inexplicably feeling a chill behind his neck. What is the situation? The weather forecast didn't mention a cooling down today. Looking at the tightly packed woman and two cute children coming down from the other side of the car door, the dean felt a bit strange. Who did Mr. Gu bring with him? Relatives. Do paternity testing quickly. Ah, good, ah. The dean instinctively answered Gu Chen's words, but when he realized it, everyone was confused. Parent-child identification. Upon closer inspection of the two children who walked over, the boy's appearance was somewhat similar to that of his boss. What's the problem? Gu Chen frowned and looked over. Why is it like one or two are deaf? No, you come with me. The dean secretly wiped the sweat off his forehead, thinking to himself that he almost ruined his future. After the female protagonist got off the car, she found that the dean had personally come to receive them. She exchanged a glance with Su Li, and both of them saw shock in each other's eyes. Is this hospital operated by him? No wonder I was so confident in the car just now. Watch your mouth and those of you. We're not allowed to spread the news about what we're here today, otherwise you'll give this position to someone else. Gu Chen knew something about Su Li and on the way to the laboratory, he made a sound reminding the dean. Okay, I got it. Prepare the top floor ward and find someone to take them over first. Gu Chen was even afraid that there would be too many people in the laboratory, and Yang Mi was at risk of being recognized. He prepared to let Su Li accompany her to the ward and wait first. Taking two children to the testing room, Gu Chen watched them draw blood first, and finally took his own. Meng Bao is really amazing. Gu Chen couldn't help but praise the two buns as they didn't even cry. Thank you for your praise, uncle. The two babies returned to him in unison, making the little nurse who drew blood envious. These two children are soft, cute and adorable, and they look so heartwarming. And, how could you be so well behaved? Which child in this age group is not as difficult to administer injections and draw blood as a pig during the Chinese New Year? Yang Mi sat restlessly in the ward, occasionally looking at the clock hanging on the wall. The little nurse who brought her over from the hospital prepared a fruit platter and tea for her, but she had no intention of eating or drinking. After accompanying her to the ward, Su Li went out to contact the team to prepare for the follow-up, and at this moment, she was the only one present. I don't know how the babies are doing. Gu Chen picked up two children one by one and went to the ward, placing them on the bed. Baby. Yang Mi rushed over as she saw Gu Chen carrying the child back, expressing her eagerness. How's it going? Yang Mi's heart finally fell when she saw the two children being brought back by Gu Chen, chatting and laughing. She looked at Gu Chen and wanted to know the outcome. The result won't be out until tomorrow. Don't worry, we'll take a break here before leaving. Gu Chen noticed her nervousness, but the result could only be released tomorrow at the earliest. Although the result has not yet come out, for some reason, Gu Chen already has a vague answer in his heart. Mom, don't be nervous. Meng Bao reached out to her for a hug. What mothers need most now is companionship and comfort. Yang Mi reached out and picked up Meng Bao, looking at Gu Chen with complex eyes. I have thought about it so many times, thinking that he may not be responsible for abandoning the three of them, thinking that he will compete with her for custody of two children, but I never expected it to be such a meeting method. I'm afraid even the script wouldn't dare to write like this, right? Gu Chen saw her staring at him and didn't know what to say, so he could only go and see the two children. After all, he was quite surprised when he suddenly had two children. But he has always been calm and self-disciplined, never easily losing his composure. At this moment, Gu Chen didn't know that he, who always claimed to be calm and rational, would soon face him directly. Both of them had their own thoughts in mind. For a moment, the atmosphere in the ward was somewhat subtle, but neither of them spoke to break it. The door of the ward was suddenly pushed open, and Su Li ran in a panic, pulling up Yang Mi and about to leave. Wait a minute, what's wrong, Sister Li? Yang Mi looked confused. Why did she suddenly pull her and leave? Just now, a large number of reporters rushed in from outside. I called the security guard to stop them for a while. You hurry up and follow me. If you don't leave, they will rush up. Su Li hurriedly pulled her. Reporter. Gu Chen's expression darkened as he said he was well prepared and wouldn't be known by the reporter. He rushed over in such a short time. If you don't say I haven't remembered yet, did you do it? Su Li was really anxious now, but she was just looking at Gu Chen. He runs this hospital. If it weren't for someone reporting, how could so many journalists come in a short time? If it's not him who did it, Su Li doesn't believe it at all. Gu Chen's face turned black as he listened to these words. I'm not so bored. Yang Mi is still a bit confused and has not paid attention to the tense atmosphere between the two. She directly asks. What should we do now? If we walk downstairs, we'll probably be surrounded by them soon. Upon hearing these words, Su Li couldn't bear to argue with Gu Chen and hurriedly walked around the ward, wanting to see if there was anything useful to help Yang Mi cover it up. Gu Chen called the dean directly and said, open the special channel and come pick us up. Later, he called Xiao Chen again and asked him to investigate what was going on with these journalists. He had an intuition that these journalists should not be running towards Yang Mi, but rather him. Dare to get your idea on me, it seems they've been quite idle lately. I'll go investigate now. Xiao Chen heard the impatience in Gu Chen's tone, and his whole body was stirred up. His CEO is angry, it's not just for fun. It seems that he has found something to do, for these journalists' time was tight, and Su Li didn't hold on to Gu Chen anymore. She followed the dean and left the special passage with her two children and Yang Mi. At this point, Gu Chen's car must have been surrounded by reporters and cannot be taken anymore. Fortunately, when the two children and Yang Mi went out, they specifically blocked their way and decided to take a taxi waiting for pick-up on the roadside, all the way back to Yang Mi's apartment. Gu Chen walked out of the hospital gate with a black face, and Xiao Chen was called by him to handle this matter. He opened the driver's door directly and drove away from the hospital without looking back, no matter what the reporter who was stopped by security called him. Chapter 9. I May It's Your Dad. You are listening at novel-full.audio. After driving away the several cars that he thought were well hidden behind him, Gu Chen still drove back to Yang Mi's residential area. After experiencing such a thing, she should feel uneasy in her heart. She rationally told herself that he should go back to the company. Although such a large group can still operate without itself, it has always been self-disciplined and does not allow anyone to trample on rules recklessly. But within reason, he felt as if he should go and accompany her. The low-key and luxurious black Maybach parked there with the engine turned off, but no one got out of the car. The anti-peeping film concealed the interior space very well. Gu Chen sat quietly in the car, looking up at a certain window of the building. His expression was dim and unclear, and he hesitated a bit. I actually don't know how to explain to my two children, nor do I know how to face Yangmi. When he came out of the hospital, his mind was full of mother and son, and he unconsciously drove the car here. After sitting in the car for a while, Gu Chen called Xiao Chen and said, after checking, come to the apartment and drive the car away. Change to a more ordinary one. Putting his phone back in his pocket, Gu Chen sighed lightly, opened the door, got off the car, and took the elevator to the familiar floor. Knocking. The sound of knocking on the door rang, and Yang Mi was swinging to the door with her two children in her arms. She asked artificial intelligence to open the visual doorbell and take a look. After today's incident, it is very likely that someone will impersonate various identities and knock on her door, so she has to be more vigilant. Seeing that the person coming was Gu Chen, Yang Mi quickly opened the door and was somewhat surprised. She thought he wouldn't come before the result came out. Standing at the door, watching the mother and son inside the open door, Gu Chen's heart inexplicably calmed down in that moment. The two little buns held in their arms looked eagerly at Gu Chen at the door, their eyes seeming to be filled with endless words, but neither of them spoke. Yang Mi saw that Gu Chen had been standing at the door without any movement, so she made way to the side and said, come in and speak. Putting two small balls on the ground and rubbing their sore arms, it feels a bit heavy to hold them together. The two babies have been growing a bit fast lately, and she can't even hold them anymore. Gu Chen entered the door, changed into the slippers he wore last night, and followed the three of them all the way to the sofa to sit down. Su Li sat near the balcony without even giving him a glance, and he didn't say hello to her. Still unable to figure out what to say, Gu Chen couldn't help but frown. His slender and good-looking fingers pinched the center of his eyebrows, and a hint of indescribable nervousness appeared in his deep pupils. The two children stared straight at him, their gaze filled with anticipation and enthusiasm. For a moment, he really didn't know how to speak up. Quiet and excessive. Yang Mi finally noticed that Gu Chen's hands, which had nowhere to place them, were occasionally held together and released. He is also nervous. Today's event. His expression was slightly unnatural. Halfway through Gu Chen's words, he turned his gaze from the floor to Yang Mi, who happened to be looking at him. Yang Mi raised her eyebrows and nodded. Cough cough, that, Mengbao Guaibao, I might be your dad. The inspection we are going to do today is to verify whether we have a parent-child relationship. Although we will only know the final result tomorrow, your mother and I have an intuition that you are my children. Gu Chen spoke tentatively while observing the reactions of the two children. Unexpectedly, when the two children heard him say this, they burst into laughter and threw themselves into his arms together. At this moment, the innocent laughter of children filled every corner of the living room with the sunshine. The reaction of the two children shocked Gu Chen and Yang Mi a little, and they exchanged a glance, not knowing why. Dad, I already knew you were Dad. My brother and I were just. Guaibao was so excited that she let out a slip of her tongue. Fortunately, Mengbao had quick eyes and hands, so she came over to cover it and blocked what she wanted to say next. But the previous words were still heard by the two of them. Gu Chen looked at the two little buns in surprise, while Yang Mi pretended to be angry and questioned them loudly. What's going on? You already know. Good boy, explain it to me clearly. Mom, don't be so cruel to your sister. It was all my idea, let me tell you. Seeing her younger sister's face turn pale with fear as she knew she had said the wrong thing, Mengbao pulled her sister behind her and chose to face her mother's anger alone. I happened to see my mother staring blankly at her phone before, and I was curious about what you were looking at. During your time in the bathroom, I secretly saw the phone number on her phone. Later on, I often found out that my mother would secretly look at those numbers behind my sister's back, so I guessed it was my dad's phone number and secretly checked it on the computer. Mengbao didn't want his mother to know that he had already confirmed his father's identity before going to find him, so she changed the words on her lips a bit, using a gentle tone. You'll know what happened later, Mom. Pretending to be afraid, Mengbao lowered her head and secretly observed the reactions of the two adults in front of her, while her voice became quieter and quieter. Yang Mi became more and more surprised as she listened. This stinky guy was the one who only found out when he found out. Fortunately, she thought he and Guibao had really met Gu Chen by chance, and was still thinking about how such a coincidence could happen. Gu Chen didn't show it on his face, but he was already shocked to the point where he couldn't speak. His identity is here, and there are quite a few people who want to trace his whereabouts. Even so, the technicians under his command have never disappointed him. He was not only amazed by Mengbao's extraordinary wisdom, but also amazed by how young a child could have such meticulous logic. Mengbao, did you do it yourself to check my location through your phone number? Yes. Sorry Dad, I went to check your privacy without your consent. At this moment, Mengbao didn't know how amazing his first talent was, but was afraid that Gu Chen would dislike him and his sister because of this, standing there weakly apologizing. My mom taught me not to do such things, but I really want to have a dad too much. No, my dear child, you are so talented in the field of computer science. I haven't had time to be happy yet. How could I blame you? Upon hearing these words, Mengbao finally lifted his head. Tears in his eyes couldn't help but fall down, and he threw himself into Gu Chen's arms again. After all, I am still a child, and no matter how mature I am in my speech and actions, I still have a child's nature. Gu Chen touched his head and reached out to hold Guibao onto his lap. Su Li, who sat next to her, didn't say a word from beginning to end. She just watched the interaction between the few people and felt a mixed feeling in her heart. The two babies indeed lack fatherly love. If there were a biological father to hurt them, she would naturally not object. Moreover, this man now seems to be caring for the children. However, due to Gu Chen's arrogance towards others, Su Li still doesn't like him and she still doesn't like him. Mommy, Guibao's stomach is hungry. As soon as this emotion relaxed, a feeling of hunger followed. Guibao flattened his mouth, touched his own belly, and made a sound to remind him. It was only then that everyone remembered that it had been almost noon since the morning's turmoil, and everyone had not eaten yet. Upon hearing these words, Su Li finally had a reaction and said, "Let me go cook, Mengbao, come and fight me." Although she doesn't like this man, after all, the two of them had children a few years ago because of that. At this point it is still appropriate to leave space for both of them. Chapter 10. I'll go pour you a cup of water. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Su Li took her child to the kitchen, and the huge living room suddenly left Yang Mi and Gu Chen speechless. The sunlight penetrated the window and sprinkled on the floor, causing the temperature in the air to gradually rise unconsciously. This atmosphere made Yang Mi feel a bit at a loss, and she coughed lightly to cover up her embarrassment. Cough. How have you been lately? Gu Chen glanced at Yang Mi, who blushed like a ripe apple. He felt that as a man, it would be better to speak up first. It's still possible. Yang Mi pondered and answered. How do you feel like your boss cares about your subordinates? How official he is. But wouldn't it be too good to just reply to this sentence? Doesn't it seem too distant? It's great. You don't have to worry. Yang Mi immediately added, but after saying it, she felt it wasn't quite appropriate. Oh my God. What am I talking about? Help. Trapped in a brief silence, one sentence elevated the awkward atmosphere. Yang Mi really wants to escape with a flash of spiritual light. Well, I'll go get you a glass of water. Before Gu Chen could react, Yang Mi almost fled and ran over the coffee table towards the restaurant. Looking at Yang Mi's windy figure, Gu Chen was stunned for a moment. She realized that she was shy, smiled helplessly, and reached out to rub her eyebrows. Pa! The sound of glass shattering on hard objects suddenly rang out. Gu Chen frowned and his body reacted faster than his brain. He stood up and rushed towards Yang Mi with a swift step. Yang Mi's reaction was a bit slow. Looking at the fragments on the ground, she finally realized what foolish thing she had done. Why are you so nervous? I can't even hold a cup firmly when pouring water, and after spending only a few hours with him, I've dropped 2 cups. Shame on yourself. Yang Mi was so anxious that she crouched down and wanted to pick up fragments on the ground. Just as she was about to touch the glass shards, her hand was grabbed by a large hand with distinct joints. Don't move. The deep voice of the man came from behind and floated lightly in Yang Mi's ear. She could even feel the scorching breath of the person behind her spraying directly on her earlobes, piercing her whole body and causing her face to instantly turn red. Gu Chen saw Yang Mi squatting down in panic to pick up the sharp glass shards with her hands. Without thinking about her movements, she stood behind her and grabbed her hand. The warm and delicate strange feeling that came from his hands made Gu Chen's heart tighten, and finally realized how ambiguous their actions were at this moment. However, as he watched the little woman in front of him blush to the point of her ear, who dared not move with her back to him, Gu Chen suddenly felt amused, which covered up the nervousness in his heart. Come over here first, I'll collect it later. In fact, the subconscious reaction of his body also left Gu Chen confused for a moment, but he didn't think so much. Gu Chen led Yang Mi by the hand and stood up, taking her away from the restaurant and placing her on the sofa. Then, he turned back to the corner and picked up a broom and dustpan before returning to the restaurant. Yang Mi has not yet fully recovered from the gesture of Gu Chen holding his hand and being so close to her, and her mind is a bit unable to turn, with her heart rate rising sharply. Inexplicably, she thought of the night 5 years ago when the two of them were skin to skin, facing each other naked. Although they were not conscious, the feeling of negative distance was still vividly imprinted in her mind. It seems a bit hot. Subconsciously patting her own face, Yang Mi realized that she was burning so hard. She quickly shook her head, trying to shake off the messy images in her mind. Gu Chen held a broom and carefully searched for possible missing fragments. After all, there were 2 children at home, and if they accidentally fell, it could still be quite dangerous if they were not swept clean. But how did her reckless personality take care of her 2 children after all these years? Gu Chen was sweeping the floor while thinking about the scene of Yang Mi dropping 2 cups, his mind full of questions. Can you really take care of it? Thinking of this, Gu Chen looked at Yang Mi sitting on the sofa and happened to catch the scene of her shaking her head. Gu Chen. He really suspects that these 2 children are taking care of her in the opposite direction, and it doesn't look like they can raise a child. After cleaning up the mess on the ground, Gu Chen put back his broom and returned to the living room. Mommy. Guibao and Mengbao ran over from the kitchen, followed by Su Li who had finished breakfast. There's nothing else, I'll go back first. Well, come over here, I'll talk to you about something. Su Li looked at Yang Mi, who was about to get up and give her a gift, with a complicated expression on her face. Yang Mi is a bit confused. What's going on? Was it captured by the reporter this morning? It shouldn't be. She's covering up so tightly. Following Su Li, she entered her bedroom and casually closed the door. Yang Mi. It seems a bit serious. Thinking wildly in her mind, Su Li was staring at her with a serious expression on her face. What's wrong, Sister Li? Did you get caught going out in the morning? The question in her heart was spoken out, and Yang Mi was also a bit nervous. If she was really caught, the subsequent handling may be a bit troublesome. No, it's not this matter. It's just you and that person. Su Li felt a bit uncomfortable speaking. She's not good at getting involved in their affairs, but she's always a bit worried in her heart. It's okay, sisterly, you can tell me. Yang Mi breathed a sigh of relief when she heard that it wasn't the morning's problem. She could tell that Su Li was worried about her, so she decided to speak up first so that she could speak more clearly. I'll be blunt. Although the child's affairs are still very close now, we still don't know the true identity of that person. After a pause, Su Li continued, but since he can own such a large hospital under his name, it's probably not a good thing. Yang Mi frowned, but she didn't expect this level. She had been busy with nervousness all morning. His identity should not be simple, you need to be careful when interacting with him. Yang Mi knew that Sister Li could say these words sincerely for her good, and she had to accept this. I know, Sister Li, don't worry, I'm a movie queen. With a smile on her face, she reached out to hug Su Li, and Yang Mi tried to ease the atmosphere with a playful tone. That person is very likely to be the father of her two treasures. Anyway, the blood relationship cannot be changed, and she is also very helpless. Be thoughtful. Su Li saw her like this, knowing that she had listened and understood that her artist had been struggling in the entertainment industry for so many years, and no matter how simple their thoughts were, they wouldn't really have a short mind. Patting Yang Mi on the back and giving her a hug, Su Li sighed and stopped talking. My brother and I are finally children with a father. Guai Bao huddled in Gu Chen's arms, tightly hugging his neck and burying his face on his shoulder, his voice choking up. The little girl's voice was milky and sticky, with a hint of crying, full of grievances, but she was trying her best to suppress herself from crying. Gu Chen felt a little distressed when he listened. Good, with my dad around in the future, I won't cry. Gu Chen comforted the little girl in his arms and extended his hand to Mengbao.